My name's Michael O'Connor. I'm the Deputy Chief for Technology and Information Systems, which we've kind of newly created, and my primary responsibilities center around upgrades to the Video Integration Center and completing some necessary upgrades to E911's infrastructure. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a U.S. Air Force fighter pilot. And around the time of my 16th birthday, my dad realized that I was looking at books a little too close to my face. So he made me go to an eye doctor's appointment, and I've got the soul-crushing news that my eyes were not going to be up to par to fly fighter planes. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do for a little while, and while I was going to college at Gulf Coast Community College, I kind of settled on law enforcement as something that would be interesting to me. My dad had been a chief of police for the security police forces in the Air Force, and while he had kind of discouraged law enforcement, I kind of fell into it, and so I kind of ended up going down that path. It was interesting. I was waiting to get hired in Florida, which really did not pay very well. And I was working for the Panama City Beach Police Department as a reserve officer, which was kind of, it's like minimum wage, hourly pay type deal. It's not a great situation to be in as a police officer. And while I was doing that, I was walking this footbeat one night with one of the older guys who was an auxiliary officer, which is not quite the same thing. And he said his son worked here and that they were hiring for the Olympics. And I had tried to get on with a couple of major police agencies in Florida, and they weren't doing much hiring. So the fact that Atlanta was hiring when nobody else was a big deal. So that's how I ended up applying here. The best part about being an Atlanta police officer for me has always been the people that I worked with first. I mean, we have a great staff. I've made a number of really great friends. There are some very talented people that work here that are very dedicated. Two, you do have opportunities, while they're not every day, to have a significant impact on people. And it can be all sorts of little things, I mean, from calling the right person for them in a traffic accident so that they can, feel better about the situation and know help's on the way, getting people the assistance that they need. We have officers that have done some really incredible things where they've bought shoes for the homeless, or they've done, all sorts of other types of community outreach. We have an officer in PAL who's done nothing but impress buying, I think she bought a car for somebody. So we just have people who will go the extra mile, and it's always truly impressive to see when they do that, and I'm always very grateful that I work here and work with these great group of people. People don't call us on their best day, so we see a lot of the very challenging things that happen in society, and they stick with you a little bit.
What was your take when you saw the George Floyd incident?
So I've seen a number of critical incidents throughout my years where it's obvious that someone's either made a poor decision or a mistake. I think what separated the situation with George Floyd is it was apparent as minute after minute rolled on in that tape that his actions were deliberate and that it wasn't a mistake, that he was being provided significant information, that the person was in distress, that he made no effort to act upon that information, and the act was really criminal, and so that's why he was eventually convicted of murder. That is an outlier in most of the incidents I've seen, but it really did kind of, when you combine that with the issues centered around the pandemic and everybody being confined, and then you have this explosive incident occurred, I think the combination of the two led to the significant types of protests that we saw, which were largely warranted other than the fact that some people chose to be violent or destructive during the protests.
What is the police department's take if you learn of an employee here using excessive force or doing something out of policy like that? What would you want the public to know about how we manage that?
So, we've come a long way in that regard. I mean, I know that when I joined the police department, you don't want to say there's a blue wall of silence, but there was certainly, we handled those types of issues in-house. Hey man, knock that off, or those kinds of things. And we're just no longer in a space where we can handle things like that internally. So we have now a mandatory rule that anyone must report any of those types of incidents to an immediate on-duty supervisor, or if it is a supervisor, that person's supervisor. But we have got to handle these situations proactively. We've got to do it immediately, and all of this needs to be transparent.
So as a commander, how do you motivate your staff in the aftermath of everything? How do you motivate your staff to keep going and to keep going out to the community to serve?
So it's been quite challenging since the protests to do that. And one of the things I know is at every roll call for a period of time while I was still in Zone 5 shortly after the protests, what I told them is that for no other reason, we have people here who rely on us. and we rely on each other. So we're going to go out there and do what we need to do, at least as certainly as it involves answering the 911 calls. And we're going to do it together, and we'll do it as teams, and we'll take care of each other, and we're going to be careful in what we do, but we need to be back out there doing the job that people pay us to do. Ultimately, if that's not for you, then I understand that maybe you need to find somewhere else to work. But you're being paid to be responsive to the citizens of the city of Atlanta, and we have to do that. I mean, it's just not a choice. So that's kind of the space that we're in. I know it's been more challenging, and it seems to be getting better as time goes on and has gotten better, and we'll continue to make improvements in that regard. But we are responsive to the citizens of the city of Atlanta, and we have to do our job. Well, we have seen this uptick in gun violence since the protests, and it's kind of continued on into this year. We were hoping it would abate a little more than it has, but it has changed in some ways. We're currently seeing more of like domestic or acquaintance situations that are going bad, and that's an inability for people to find a way to get along in some way, or they're escalating situations in the moment that they're not thinking through very well, and they're not understanding the long-term consequences of taking such a dire action. Because we've had some people who've just had minor arguments or transgressions and escalated those all the way to homicide, where you're going to spend significant amount of your rest of your life in prison, because we clear the vast majority of homicides in the city of Atlanta. So if you kill someone here, chances are you're going to prison.
When you think about crime and everything that's going on in the city, even though we're making great progress, what's something that you think the public can do to help the police department reduce certain crime statistics? Is there anything that comes to mind?
The single biggest thing that the public can always do to help us around crime is to apply a certain amount of common sense to every situation that they're involved in, and be willing to actively provide information to us. So if you know that you're going to a parking deck and you're not going to be able to monitor your car and you're going to leave it there for several hours, it's probably not in your best interest to leave your Apple computer sitting on the front seat of the car, which is prime pickings for somebody who comes along. I mean, and we don't always do that. Sometimes people just don't think that through. They get in a hurry, they're in a rush, they're like, oh, it'll be fine. And then they come back and find out that it's not. So it's always helpful if they think about that a little bit in advance. And then two, if you do see something, say something, call us. I mean, we're here to try and figure out the situation in the aftermath, and we can only do that with the information you provide us.
What do you want the public to know about police officers today?
Well, I think the public on some level knows this, but we're just people. We're the same people. We're not substantially different from any other human being. We take on a very challenging job. It's a very challenging situation. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're trying to do the right thing. And everybody's trying to do the very best job that they can do, but there is a certain amount of human fallacy that goes into any occupation. We're no different. So probably for the last decade, the lion's share of my free time has been spent with both of my daughters. At one time, both of them were playing softball. Now I just have the one older daughter who's playing softball and looks like she's likely to play at the collegiate level. And then my other daughter played for a period of time, then she cheerleaded. Now she's decided that she likes having a little cash in her pocket, so it seems as if we're going the work route. But they take up the lion's share of my time, and that's really, if I'm not here working, I'm doing something with a kid somewhere.
So who's your favorite NFL team? It must be the Steelers, right?
It's my father's favorite. Pittsburgh Steelers were my father's favorite team. My favorite football team for the longest time, which was whatever team Peyton Manning was on. My older daughter Peyton is named after Peyton, and even though I went to Florida State and he's a Tennessee guy, for some reason I saw an interview of him when he was in college. I was really impressed. I liked the guy. I followed his whole pro career. And since he's retired, I'm back to being an Atlanta Falcons fan. I've been here 26 years, so hopefully they do well this year. For those that are interested in a career in law enforcement, I believe that the Atlanta Police Department is the best choice in the southeastern United States. And I believe that for a number of reasons. And it really doesn't have to do with salary and benefits, although we do have a very competitive salary and benefit package now, currently. But it has to do with opportunities. You're working in a major city. We have a variety of units and specialties. You'll have lots of opportunity to do lots of different things over the time of your career. And then everyone needs to remember that everyone should spend a certain amount of time in patrol. I know that I spent over 7.5 years as a patrol officer, and that training and that doing that job every day set me up for a great future to do everything else I've done subsequently. So it gives you an opportunity here unlike any other. And what makes this job interesting, or has always been interesting to me, is no day has ever been the same. Every day is something new. This is not like going, to whatever, going to a bank and sitting in front of a computer and doing kind of the same thing every day. Yes, you'll get in a patrol car and you'll drive around the city, but every call will be different. And that has been the part that I've always found most interesting, is there's something new comes up every day.